The organ music swelled through the cathedral. Every head turned toward the doors. But Grace Chen wasn't looking at the bride. Her eyes were locked on the woman in the last row, the one in the donated dress, clutching a worn envelope. The homeless woman Vincent Moretti had personally invited. The woman no one recognized. The woman who shouldn't exist in this world of marble floors and champagne fountains. Grace's fingers trembled against the pew. She knew that face. She knew those hands. And in 30 seconds, when that woman stood up, everything Vincent had built would either crumble or finally make sense. The envelope crinkled. The woman rose. Grace's heart stopped. This was it. This is a story that will grip you from beginning to end. If you want to know how a homeless woman became the most important guest at a Mafia wedding, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Every view matters. Grace Chen had exactly $43 to her name when she woke up under the Jefferson Street overpass. The morning sun cut through the concrete columns, harsh and unforgiving. She folded her cardboard shelter carefully, the same motions she'd performed for 8 months now. Muscle memory from a life she barely recognized anymore. Her hands shook as she counted the bills. $43. Not enough for a room. Not enough for anything that mattered. 3 years ago, she'd been Dr. Grace Chen, pediatric surgeon. She'd had an apartment with a view, a car that started every morning, colleagues who respected her. Then came the malpractice lawsuit. The one that wasn't her fault. The hospital administrator who'd altered her records to cover his own mistakes. The legal fees that consumed everything. The medical board that suspended her license while they investigated. The downward spiral had been swift and merciless. Now she was 34 years old, sleeping under bridges, and trying to remember what hope felt like. Grace gathered her few belongings into a backpack, toothbrush, change of clothes, the medical textbook she couldn't bear to sell. She walked toward the soup kitchen on 5th, her stomach tight with hunger she'd learned to ignore. That's when she heard the screaming. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. Years of training overrode everything else. She ran toward the sound. A crowd had gathered near the intersection. Black SUVs blocked the street. Men in suits formed a perimeter, shouting into phones. And in the center of it all, a boy, maybe 7 years old, lay on the pavement, convulsing. Someone call 911. A woman shrieked. They're 20 minutes out. A man in a suit yelled back. Grace pushed through the crowd. Her rational mind screamed at her to walk away. She wasn't a doctor anymore. She had no license, no protection, no right to touch a patient. But the boy's lips were turning blue. She dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands moved with precision she thought she'd lost, tilting his head, checking his airway, positioning him on his side as the seizure continued. "What the hell are you doing?" A hand grabbed her shoulder, yanking her back. Grace looked up into the coldest eyes she'd ever seen. The man towering over her radiated danger. His tailored suit probably cost more than she'd earned in a month before everything fell apart. A scar cut through his left eyebrow. Every person in the crowd had stepped back when he moved. This was a man accustomed to absolute obedience. "He's seizing," Grace said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "If you want him to live, let me work." "Who the fuck are you?" "Someone who knows what she's doing." Grace turned back to the boy, monitoring his breathing. "How long has he been seizing?" 3 minutes. The dangerous man's voice cracked slightly. "Maybe 4. Does he have epilepsy? Any medical conditions?" "I don't," the man faltered. "Marco, does my son have epilepsy?" "Son." Grace's chest tightened. This wasn't just any child. An older man in an expensive suit rushed forward. "No, Mr. Moretti. Nothing we know of. He was fine this morning." "Moretti." Vincent Moretti. Grace had heard that name whispered in the shelters. The Mafia boss who controlled half the city's underground operations. The man you didn't cross unless you wanted to disappear. And this was his son. The boy's convulsions began to slow. Grace kept her hand on his pulse, counting, timing, assessing. When the seizure finally stopped, she carefully positioned him in recovery position. "He needs a hospital," she said. "This could be a first-time seizure, or it could be something serious. Either way, he needs imaging and blood work immediately." Vincent Moretti stared at her. Really looked at her. Grace became suddenly, painfully aware of what he saw: dirty clothes, unwashed hair, the smell of the street clinging to her skin. "You're homeless." It wasn't a question. "That doesn't change the fact that your son needs medical attention." Grace stood, stepping back from the boy as EMTs finally arrived. She'd done what she could. Time to disappear before questions started. She turned to leave. "Wait." Vincent's command stopped her cold. "What's your name?" Grace hesitated. Every instinct told her to run. Men like Vincent Moretti didn't forget faces. Didn't let debts go unpaid. "Grace Chen." "You a doctor, Grace Chen?" "I was." Something flickered in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of a fellow fallen person. "You saved my son's life. I stabilized him. The EMTs will do the rest." "Nonetheless." Vincent pulled out his wallet. Grace's pride wanted her to refuse before he even made the offer. But pride didn't fill an empty stomach. He held out 5 $100 bills. Grace stared at the money. $500. More than she'd seen in months. "I don't want your charity," she said, even as her hands itched to take it. "It's not charity. It's payment for services rendered." Vincent's eyes held hers. "Take it. You earned it." Grace took the money. Her fingers trembled as they closed around the bills. "Thank you." "No." Vincent's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Thank you." He turned to supervise as the EMTs loaded his son into the ambulance. Grace watched the convoy of black SUVs follow, disappearing into the city traffic. She looked down at the money in her hands. $500. Enough for a room. A week of meals. Maybe even a chance to. "Ms. Chen." A man in a suit had approached so quietly she hadn't heard him. "Mr. Moretti requests your presence at his residence tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. He handed her a card with an address in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. "He wishes to thank you properly." The man disappeared before Grace could respond. She stared at the card. Tomorrow evening. Vincent Moretti's mansion. This was either the best opportunity she'd ever been handed, or the most dangerous mistake she was about to make. Grace stood outside Vincent Moretti's mansion at 6:58 p.m., her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd used some of the money for a decent outfit from a thrift store. Simple black dress, low heels that didn't quite fit right. She'd showered at the community center, washed her hair until it shone. For the first time in months, she looked almost human. Almost respectable. But she didn't belong here. That much was obvious from the iron gates, the security cameras, the guard who'd checked her name against a list before letting her through. The front door opened before she could knock. A woman in her 50s, elegant and composed, smiled warmly. "Dr. Chen, please come in. Mr. Moretti is expecting you." Grace followed her through hallways that belonged in a museum. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that was probably worth more than her entire former life. The contrast between this world and the overpass where she'd woken up yesterday felt surreal. The woman led her to a study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, leather furniture that whispered old money. And Vincent Moretti, standing by the window, looking out over his estate. He turned when she entered. In the daylight yesterday, he'd been terrifying. Tonight, in his own domain, he was something else entirely. Dangerous, yes. But also human. Tired. Worried. Dr. Chen. He gestured to a chair. Please sit. Can I offer you something? Wine. Coffee. Water would be fine. Grace's throat felt dry. Vincent poured 2 glasses from a crystal decanter. His hands were steady, controlled. Everything about him spoke of absolute command. How's your son? Grace asked. Stable. The hospital ran every test imaginable. Vincent handed her the water. They found a minor cardiac arrhythmia. Nothing life-threatening, but it can trigger seizures under stress. They've prescribed medication. He should be fine. Relief flooded through Grace. That's good. Manageable. Because of you. Vincent sat in the chair opposite hers. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't known what to do. He didn't finish the sentence. Anyone with medical training would have done the same. But you're not just anyone, are you? Vincent leaned forward. I had you researched. Dr. Grace Chen. Top of your class at Johns Hopkins. Pediatric surgery residency at Mass General. 3 years at Children's Hospital with an impeccable record. Until 18 months ago. Grace's water glass trembled in her hand. Then you know what happened. I know what they say happened. I also know that the hospital administrator who accused you of malpractice is currently under investigation for embezzlement and falsifying medical records. I know your case is being reviewed. Vincent's eyes held hers. And I know you're innocent. The words hit Grace like a physical blow. She'd heard a lot of things over the past year. Accusations, whispers, pitying looks. But never that. Never innocent. The review board hasn't made that determination yet, she said quietly. But they will. Vincent stood, pacing to the window. Men like Gerald Morrison, that's the administrator who framed you, they leave trails. Digital signatures on altered documents. Testimonies that don't quite line up. I have resources. I've seen the evidence. Why? Grace's voice came out hoarse. Why would you investigate me? Vincent turned back to her. For the first time, she saw genuine emotion crack through his controlled exterior. Because you saved my son's life without hesitation. You were homeless, hungry, had every reason to protect yourself and walk away. But you didn't. You risked legal consequences to help a child. He paused. That kind of integrity is rare. Especially in my world. Grace didn't know what to say. The weight of the past 18 months pressed down on her. The shame, the loss, the endless nights wondering if she'd ever practice medicine again. I'm going to help you, Vincent said. It wasn't a question or an offer. It was a statement of fact. My lawyers will work with your review board. We'll expedite the investigation. You'll have your license reinstated. I can't afford. You already paid. You saved my son. This is me settling my debt. Grace wanted to argue. Wanted to say she didn't need his help, that she could handle this herself. But that would be a lie. She was drowning, had been drowning for months, and he was throwing her a lifeline. Why? She asked again. This seems like more than gratitude. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. My son, Alessandro, he's everything to me. His mother died when he was 2. A rival family, a car bomb meant for me. He doesn't remember her. I barely remember what it felt like before the grief became just background noise. He looked directly at Grace. Yesterday, when I saw him on the ground, seizing, I felt that terror again. Pure, absolute helplessness. And then you appeared. You knew exactly what to do. You weren't afraid. You just acted. Grace saw it then, the vulnerability beneath the armor. Vincent Moretti was one of the most powerful men in the city, maybe the country. But he was also a father who'd almost lost his son. "How old is Alessandro?" she asked. 7. "He's brilliant, curious, stubborn as hell." A rare smile touched Vincent's lips. "He wants to be a doctor. After yesterday, he won't stop talking about the angel lady who helped him." Something warm bloomed in Grace's chest. "I'd like to meet him. Properly, I mean. If that's appropriate." Vincent's smile widened. "He's been asking to see you. I told him you might visit." Before Grace could respond, there was a knock on the door. A young boy burst in, followed by an exasperated-looking nanny. "Papa, is she here? Is the angel lady—" Alessandro stopped short when he saw Grace. His eyes went wide. "Alessandro," Vincent said gently, "what did we discuss about interrupting?" "I'm sorry, Papa, but I had to see if she was real." The boy rushed forward, stopping just short of Grace's chair. "You saved me. The doctors said I could have died." Grace knelt down to his level. "You're a brave kid, Alessandro. How are you feeling?" "Better. They gave me medicine. It tastes gross, but Papa says I have to take it." Alessandro studied her with intense focus. "Are you really homeless? Marco said you sleep under a bridge." "Alessandro." Vincent's voice sharpened. "It's okay," Grace said quickly. She looked at the boy's earnest face. "Yes, I am. But I'm working on changing that. Papa has lots of rooms. You could stay here," Alessandro announced with the simple logic of childhood. Vincent and Grace's eyes met over the boy's head. Something passed between them, an acknowledgment of possibility, of change, of roads not yet traveled. "We'll see," Vincent said carefully. "But right now, you need to finish your homework before bed." Alessandro groaned but didn't argue. He hugged Grace quickly, a brief, fierce embrace, before running back out. The silence he left behind felt charged. "I should go," Grace said, standing. "Wait." Vincent moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I meant what I said. I'm going to help you get your license back. But beyond that—" He hesitated, and Grace realized this man who commanded empires was nervous. "I'd like you to consider working as Alessandro's personal physician. He needs someone who understands his condition. Someone I trust. You barely know me. I know enough." Vincent's hand reached out, stopping just short of touching her arm. "I've built my life on reading people, on understanding who to trust and who to eliminate. You, Dr. Chen, are someone worth trusting." Grace's breath caught. This was more than a job offer. This was an invitation into Vincent Moretti's life. His son's life. His world. A world that was dangerous, morally complex, and completely outside everything she'd ever known. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Vincent handed her another card. "This has my direct number. Call me when you decide." Grace took the card. Their fingers brushed. The contact sent electricity up her arm. She left the mansion in a daze, Vincent's offer echoing in her mind. By the time she reached the street, night had fallen completely. A black SUV pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. Vincent's security chief, Marco, looked out at her. "Mr. Moretti arranged a hotel room for you tonight. Figured you'd want somewhere comfortable to think." He held out a key card. "The Regency. Room 1804. It's paid through the end of the month." Grace stared at the key. End of the month. That was 2 weeks. 2 weeks of safety, warmth, a real bed. He also wanted you to have this. Mako handed her an envelope. Grace opened it. Inside was a check for $10,000. I can't. He said you'd say that. He also said to tell you it's not charity, it's an advance on your salary if you accept his offer. And if you don't accept, consider it payment for consulting on his son's care. Mako's expression softened slightly. Take it, document. The boss doesn't make offers like this. Ever. The SUV pulled away before Grace could respond. She looked down at the check. $10,000. The hotel key. A chance at her old life back. And Vincent Moretti, with his dangerous world and wounded eyes, offering her something she thought she'd lost forever. Purpose. Grace walked toward the hotel, the city lights reflecting off the glass towers above. Tomorrow, she'd have to decide. Tonight, for the first time in 8 months, she'd sleep in a real bed. 3 months later, Grace had almost forgotten what sleeping under an overpass felt like. Almost. She stood in the medical suite Vincent had built in the mansion's east wing, state-of-the-art equipment, pharmacy, everything she needed to monitor Alessandro's condition. Her medical license had been reinstated 6 weeks ago. Vincent's lawyers had been brutally efficient. Gerald Morrison was now facing federal charges. Grace's record was cleared. She was Dr. Chen again. But the person she'd become wasn't the same woman who'd lost everything 18 months ago. Papa says you're coming to the wedding. Alessandro sat on the examination table, swinging his legs while Grace checked his vitals. You have to come. It's going to be huge. Grace smiled. I heard. Your Uncle Marco is getting married. Yep. To Sophia. She's really pretty and she makes Papa laugh. That's rare. Alessandro said it matter-of-factly, the observation of a child who'd learned to read his father's moods. Grace understood. She'd learned to read Vincent too over these months. The subtle shifts in his expression. The way his voice dropped when he was truly angry versus merely annoyed. The rare moments when his guard came down and she glimpsed the man beneath the armor. Those moments happened more frequently when they were alone together. Your heart rhythm is perfect, Grace said, marking it on his chart. The medication is working beautifully. Do I have to take it forever? Probably. But it's a small pill, once a day. That's not so bad, is it? Alessandro shrugged. I guess not. At least I can still play soccer. Absolutely. Just keep your emergency medication with you, and you're good to go. Grace ruffled his hair. Now go finish your homework before your tutor arrives. Alessandro hopped down and hugged her, another habit he'd developed. Grace hugged him back, warmth spreading through her chest. This boy had become important to her. More important than she'd expected. After he left, Grace updated her files. She'd just finished when Vincent appeared in the doorway. How is he? Vincent asked. Perfect. No irregularities. Good energy levels. He's responding well to the dosage. Good. Vincent stepped into the room. He wore his standard uniform, tailored suit, crisp white shirt. But his tie was loose, top button undone. It was 7 in the evening. The end of his workday, such as it was for a man who ruled a criminal empire. Grace had learned not to ask about his work. Some boundaries remained uncrossed. Alessandro mentioned the wedding, Grace said. Congratulations to your brother. Thank you. It's going to be a circus. 300 guests, cathedral ceremony, reception at the Grand Hall. Vincent moved closer. I'd like you to come. As Alessandro's physician? As my guest. The air between them shifted. This was the thing they'd been dancing around for months, the attraction that sparked every time they were in the same room. The lingering glances. The accidental touches that felt anything but accidental. "Vincent," Grace started. "I know." He cut her off gently. "I know all the reasons this is complicated. My world, your fresh start, the fact that you work for me. But Grace." He reached out, his fingers tracing her jawline. "I can't stop thinking about you." Grace's breath caught. She should step back. Maintain professional distance. This was her employer, a Mafia boss, a man whose life was filled with violence and moral ambiguity. But she didn't step back. "I think about you too," she admitted quietly. Vincent's eyes darkened. "Then come to the wedding. Not as Alessandro's doctor. As the woman I can't get out of my head. People will talk. Let them." Vincent's thumb traced her lower lip. "I stopped caring about gossip a long time ago." Grace's heart hammered. She knew she should be cautious. Should think this through. But 3 months of living in his house, seeing him be gentle with his son, watching him handle crises with controlled calm, had eroded her defenses. Vincent Moretti was dangerous. But he was also honorable in his own way. Protective. And looking at her like she was something precious. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll come." Vincent's smile was slow and devastating. "Good." He leaned in. Grace's eyes fluttered closed. Their lips were a breath apart when, "Papa." "Dr. Grace." "Come quick." They jerked apart. Alessandro's voice echoed through the hallway, high with excitement rather than fear. Vincent cursed softly in Italian. Grace laughed despite herself. "Duty calls," she said. "This conversation isn't over," Vincent promised, his eyes holding hers for one more heated moment before he turned toward his son's voice. Grace touched her lips where his thumb had been moments ago. No, this conversation definitely wasn't over. The next 2 weeks blurred past. Grace found herself swept into wedding preparations despite her protests. Sophia, Marco's bride-to-be, insisted Grace needed a proper dress for the event. "You're Vincent's guest," Sophia said as they stood in an exclusive boutique. "That means you're family. And family doesn't show up in off-the-rack." Grace tried on dress after dress until they found it, a deep emerald silk gown that hugged her curves and made her look elegant without being ostentatious. When Vincent saw her in it during the final fitting, Sophia had orchestrated that deliberately, his expression made Grace's knees weak. "Beautiful," he said simply. But his eyes said much more. The day of the wedding arrived. Grace stood in the mansion's guest room, adjusting her dress for the 10th time. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. 4 months ago, she'd been sleeping under a bridge. Now she was wearing a designer gown, about to attend a high-society wedding as the date of the most powerful crime boss in the city. Her life had become unrecognizable. A knock on the door. Vincent stood there in a tuxedo that should be illegal. He looked devastating. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." Vincent extended his arm. Grace took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fabric. They drove to the cathedral in one of the black SUVs, Alessandro chattering excitedly between them. The boy wore a miniature tuxedo and looked absurdly proud of his role as ring-bearer. The cathedral was spectacular. Flowers everywhere, hundreds of guests in their finest, an orchestra playing as people found their seats. Grace felt eyes tracking her as she walked in with Vincent's hand on her lower back. Whispers followed them. "Who's that?" "Vincent's date." "I heard she's Alessandro's doctor." Vincent's hand pressed more firmly against her back, reassuring, claiming, protective. They sat in the front row, Alessandro between them. The ceremony began. Marco stood at the altar, looking nervous in a way Grace had never seen him. When Sophia appeared at the back of the cathedral, the love on Marco's face was unmistakable. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. She'd forgotten that love could look like that, pure, uncomplicated, certain. She glanced at Vincent. He was already looking at her. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. Alessandro performed his ring-bearer duties with adorable seriousness. Marco and Sofia exchanged vows that made half the guests cry. And when they kissed, the applause was thunderous. The reception was held at the Grand Hall, a historic building that the Moretti family had clearly rented out entirely. Champagne flowed. A live band played. The food was extraordinary. Grace found herself swept into conversation after conversation. Vincent's family was huge, sprawling, and intimidating. But they treated her with cautious respect. Vincent's date was not to be trifled with. "Dance with me," Vincent murmured in her ear during dinner. Grace let him lead her to the dance floor. His hand settled on her waist, warm and possessive. They swayed to the music, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat. "Thank you for coming," Vincent said quietly. "Thank you for inviting me." "Grace." Vincent's hand tightened on her waist. "I need to tell you something." Her heart rate spiked. "Okay." "These past 3 months, having you in my house, watching you with Alessandro, getting to know you." Vincent paused, his jaw tight. "You've become essential. Not just to him. To me." Grace's breath caught. "I know my life is complicated. I know I'm asking you to step into a world that's dangerous and morally gray. But Vincent stopped, his eyes searching hers. "I'm falling for you. Hard." The music swelled around them. Grace felt like the entire room had disappeared, leaving just the two of them in this moment. "I'm falling for you too," she whispered. Vincent's eyes blazed. He pulled her closer, proprietary and gentle at the same time. They danced in silence, the weight of their admission hanging between them. When the song ended, Vincent led her outside to the terrace. The city lights sparkled below. They were alone for the first time all evening. "I want you to know something," Vincent said, turning to face her. "My world, it's brutal. I won't lie about that. But I would never let anything hurt you. You or Alessandro. You're under my protection now. Completely." "Vincent." "Let me finish." His hand cupped her face. "I've done things I'm not proud of. Things you probably don't want to know about. But with you, I want to be better. You make me want to be the man my son believes I am." Grace's heart clenched. She could see the war in his eyes, the man he'd had to become versus the man he wished he could be. "You're already that man," she said softly. "I've seen you with Alessandro. I've seen your loyalty to your family. You're not just what you do, Vincent. You're who you choose to be." Vincent's control cracked. He kissed her. The kiss was everything Grace had imagined and more, demanding yet tender, possessive yet respectful. His hands tangled in her hair. She gripped his lapels, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "Stay tonight," he whispered. "Not in the guest wing. With me." Grace knew what he was asking. This was the line. Once they crossed it, there was no going back. She thought about the woman she'd been 4 months ago, broken, homeless, hopeless. She thought about the woman she was now, restored, purposeful, falling in love with a dangerous man. "Yes," she said. Vincent's smile was fierce and genuine. He kissed her again, softer this time, and led her back inside. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. Grace was hyper-aware of Vincent beside her, his hand finding hers under the table, the promise in his eyes every time their gazes met. They said their goodbyes as the party wound down. Alessandro had already been driven home by his nanny, exhausted and happy. In the SUV, Vincent pulled Grace against his side. She went willingly, her head on his shoulder. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "Not yet." Vincent laughed, the sound low and intimate. "I'll do my best to keep it that way." They arrived at the mansion. Vincent led her upstairs, past her usual room, to the master suite she'd never entered. It was elegant and masculine. Dark wood, leather furniture, a massive bed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the estate. Vincent turned to face her, suddenly hesitant. This powerful, dangerous man looked almost uncertain. "Are you sure?" he asked. Grace answered by kissing him. They tumbled onto the bed, hands exploring, defenses crumbling. That night, Grace gave herself to Vincent Moretti completely. And he handled her like she was precious, like she was worth protecting, like she was his. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Grace stared at the ceiling and wondered how her life had become this. 4 months ago, she'd had nothing. Now she had everything. "What are you thinking?" Vincent's voice rumbled against her ear. "That this feels like a dream. It's real." Vincent pulled her closer. "You're real. We're real." Grace closed her eyes, letting herself believe it. Outside, the city slept. Inside, wrapped in Vincent Moretti's arms, Grace Chen finally felt safe. She had no idea how fragile that safety was, or that in 2 weeks everything would nearly destroy them both. Grace woke to the sound of gunshots. She jerked upright in Vincent's bed, her heart slamming against her ribs. Beside her, Vincent was already moving, rolling out of bed, grabbing the gun from his nightstand, his face transformed from sleepy lover to lethal commander in seconds. "Stay here," he ordered. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." "Vincent." "Now, Grace." He was out the door before she could argue. Grace scrambled out of bed, pulling on Vincent's shirt from the night before. Her hands shook as she locked the door. More gunshots echoed through the mansion. Shouting. The sound of breaking glass. Her medical training kicked in. She couldn't hide. If people were hurt, she needed to help. Grace unlocked the door and ran toward Alessandro's room. She found chaos in the hallway. 2 of Vincent's men stood guard outside Alessandro's door, guns drawn. When they saw Grace, one tried to stop her. "Dr. Chen, you need to get back." "Is Alessandro safe?" "Yes, ma'am. He's in the panic room with his nanny." Relief flooded through Grace. "Anyone injured?" 3 men downstairs. "Intruders. Boss is handling it." Grace pushed past them and ran toward the stairs. The front entrance was a war zone. Shattered glass, bullet holes in the walls, 3 bodies on the marble floor. Vincent's men were dragging another man in a ski mask, very much alive, toward the study. Vincent stood in the center of it all, gun in hand, blood spattered across his white T-shirt. Not his blood, Grace realized with a sick lurch of her stomach. "Grace, I told you to stay upstairs." Vincent's voice cracked like a whip. "People are hurt. I'm a doctor." Grace knelt beside one of Vincent's men who was bleeding from his shoulder. "I need my medical bag. Now." Someone ran to get it. Grace worked on autopilot, assessing wounds, applying pressure, barking orders. 2 men had non-life-threatening injuries. The third, one of the intruders, was dying. Gunshot to the chest. Nothing she could do without a hospital. "Let him die," Vincent said coldly from behind her. Grace looked up at him. His face was stone. This was Vincent Moretti, the crime boss. Not the man who'd held her tenderly last night. "I'm a doctor," she said quietly. "I don't let people die. He came here to kill my son." The words hung in the air. Grace's hands stilled on the dying man's chest. "What?" This was a targeted hit. They went straight for Alessandro's room. Vincent's voice was deadly calm. "If you hadn't moved him to the panic room last month for the security upgrades, they would have succeeded." Ice flooded Grace's veins. Alessandro. Someone had tried to kill Alessandro. The man beneath her hands gurgled. Blood bubbled from his lips. Grace knew enough to recognize death approaching. She also knew Vincent was right. This man had come to murder a 7-year-old child. Grace stood up, stepping back. The man died 30 seconds later. She stared at his body, at the blood on her hands, at the violence that had shattered the illusion of safety she'd built over the past weeks. Grace. Vincent's voice softened. He reached for her. Grace stepped back. I need to check on Alessandro. She walked away before Vincent could respond, her legs mechanical. One foot in front of the other. Up the stairs. Down the hall. Alessandro's nanny had brought him out of the panic room. The boy looked pale and scared, clutching a stuffed bear. Dr. Grace. He ran to her. Grace caught him, holding him tight. Her hands left bloody smears on his pajamas. She didn't care. You're okay, she whispered. You're safe. I've got you. I heard shooting. Papa said. Alessandro's voice broke. Your papa protected us. Everything's okay now. It was a lie. Everything was not okay. Someone had tried to kill this child. Vincent's world, the world Grace had been trying to ignore, had crashed into them with brutal force. She held Alessandro until he stopped shaking, then checked him over medically. Pulse, breathing, signs of shock. He was terrified but physically unharmed. Can you stay with me? Alessandro asked quietly. Of course. All night if you need me to. Grace spent the next 3 hours in Alessandro's room while Vincent dealt with the aftermath downstairs. The nanny brought tea. Alessandro finally fell asleep around dawn, curled against Grace's side. Only then did Vincent appear in the doorway. He looked exhausted. The blood had been cleaned from his skin, but his eyes held a darkness Grace had never seen before. We need to talk, he said quietly. Grace carefully extracted herself from Alessandro's bed and followed Vincent to his study. The bodies were gone. The glass had been swept up, but bullet holes still pocked the walls, evidence of how close they'd come to tragedy. Vincent poured himself a whiskey. He didn't offer her one. The attack was ordered by the Costello family, he said without preamble. They wanted to hurt me where it would destroy me completely. My son. Grace's stomach churned. Will they try again? Not after tonight. Vincent's voice was cold. I've already sent word. By morning, every Costello lieutenant will understand what happens when you threaten my family. Grace didn't ask what that meant. She didn't want to know. I'm sending Alessandro away, Vincent continued. My cousin has a compound in Switzerland. Security is impenetrable. He'll be safe there until this is resolved. For how long? However long it takes. Vincent drained his whiskey. Could be weeks. Could be months. He needs his medication monitored. His condition. You'll go with him. Grace blinked. What? You're his doctor. You're the only one I trust with his care. Vincent finally looked at her. And you're not safe here anymore either. The Costellos know who you are now. They'll use you to get to me. The reality crashed over Grace. She'd become a target. By falling for Vincent, by caring for his son, she'd painted a bullseye on her own back. When do we leave? She asked quietly. Tomorrow night. Private jet. My cousin Luca will meet you in Geneva. Vincent moved closer. Grace, I need you to understand something. This is my life. This is what I am. Men will always want to hurt me by hurting the people I love. And his voice cracked slightly, I love you. Which means you're in danger now. Always. Grace's breath caught. It was the first time he'd said the words directly. I love you too, she whispered. But Vincent, I can't live like this. Constantly looking over my shoulder. Watching a child I care about have to flee the country because someone wants to kill him. I know. Vincent's hand cupped her face. I know what I'm asking. It's not fair. You deserve better than this. Then give me better. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Walk away. Leave this life. Take Alessandro and disappear. We could. I can't. Vincent's voice was tortured. You don't understand. I'm in too deep. The family, the obligations, the blood I've already spilled. There's no walking away. There's only forward. Grace pulled back. Then I don't know if I can do this. The silence between them was deafening. Go to Switzerland, Vincent said finally. Keep Alessandro safe. Give me time to end this war. And then... He trailed off. And then what? And then you decide. If I'm worth the danger. If this life is something you can live with. Vincent's eyes held hers. I won't force you to stay. I love you too much for that. Grace's tears spilled over. She wanted to say she'd stay regardless. That love was enough. But looking at the bullet holes in the walls, remembering the dying man on the floor, she couldn't. Okay, she whispered. I'll go to Switzerland. I'll keep Alessandro safe. And then, we'll see. Vincent pulled her into his arms. Grace buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, memorizing the feel of him. Tomorrow she'd leave. Tomorrow she'd take Alessandro somewhere safe and try to figure out if she could love a man whose world was built on violence. Tonight, she just held on. The next 36 hours passed in a blur. Grace packed. Alessandro asked 1,000 questions she couldn't answer. Vincent made arrangements, his phone constantly ringing, his face growing harder with each conversation. They left at midnight. Grace, Alessandro, and 4 of Vincent's most trusted men. The private jet was luxurious and silent. Alessandro fell asleep an hour into the flight, his head on Grace's lap. She stared out the window at the darkness below and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Switzerland was beautiful and cold. Luca Moretti's compound sat in the Alps, surrounded by snow-capped peaks and impenetrable security. The man himself was in his 40s, scarred, and surprisingly gentle with Alessandro. Your father and I grew up together, Luca told the boy. I'll keep you safe. That's a promise. The days settled into routine. Grace monitored Alessandro's health. They went for walks in the mountains. She read to him at night. It was peaceful and surreal. Vincent called every evening. Brief conversations heavy with things unsaid. The situation is progressing, was all he'd tell her. It'll be over soon. Grace wanted to ask what over meant. How many people had to die before he considered it resolved? But she didn't. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Grace stood on the compound's terrace one evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Her phone rang. Vincent. It's done, he said without preamble. The Costello family has surrendered. You can come home. Home. Grace's chest tightened at the word. What did you have to do? She asked quietly. Vincent was silent for a long moment. What I always do. What I'll always have to do. Grace closed her eyes. Alessandro will be happy to hear it. And you? Vincent's voice was rough. Will you be happy to come back? Grace thought about the past 3 weeks. The peace. The safety. The absence of fear. She also thought about lying in Vincent's arms. Alessandro's laughter when the 3 of them had dinner together. The way Vincent looked at her like she was his entire world. Yes, she said. I'll be happy to come home. She heard Vincent's exhale of relief. I love you, Grace. I love you too." They flew back 2 days later. Vincent met them at the private airstrip, pulling Alessandro into a fierce hug before turning to Grace. Their eyes met. So much had changed. So much remained uncertain. But when Vincent reached for her hand, Grace took it. They drove back to the mansion together. Vincent, Alessandro chattering about Switzerland, and Grace staring out at the city she'd left behind. The mansion looked the same. But Grace felt different. She'd crossed a threshold. Chosen this life knowingly. That night, after Alessandro was asleep, Vincent led Grace to the master bedroom. "I know what I'm asking of you," he said. "I know the risks. But Grace, I swear I will protect you. Always." "I know." Grace touched his face. "And I'm choosing to trust that. Choosing you." Vincent kissed her like she was oxygen. Like she was everything. They made love slowly, carefully, sealing the decision they'd both made. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Grace thought about the homeless woman she'd been 5 months ago. That woman could never have imagined this, lying in a crime boss's bed, in love, terrified and certain all at once. "No regrets," Vincent murmured against her hair. Grace thought about it honestly. The danger. The violence. The moral complexity of loving a man who did terrible things for reasons he believed were right. "Not yet," she said. Vincent's arms tightened around her. "I'll spend every day making sure you never do." It was a promise Grace knew he'd keep. Or die trying. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. 6 months later, Grace stood in her medical suite reviewing Alessandro's latest test results. All normal. His condition was perfectly managed. He was thriving. So was she, if she was honest. The past months had been an adjustment. Learning to live with Vincent's world. The security protocols. The dangerous men who came and went from the mansion. The conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. But Vincent kept his word. He protected her. Kept her separate from the worst of his business. And slowly, Grace found her peace with it. She'd also found purpose beyond Alessandro's care. Vincent had funded a free clinic in the city's poorest neighborhood. Grace worked there 3 days a week, treating people who couldn't afford health care. It felt like redemption for all the months she'd spent helpless on the streets. "Dr. Grace." Alessandro burst into the medical suite. "Papa needs you downstairs. He said it's important." Grace followed him down to Vincent's study. Marco was there, looking uncomfortable. Sophia stood beside him, her hand on her very pregnant belly. And Vincent stood by the window, tense in a way that made Grace's instincts flare. "What's wrong?" she asked. Vincent turned. "Do you remember the wedding? 6 months ago." "Of course." "Do you remember the homeless woman I invited? The one who sat in the back?" Grace frowned. She'd been so focused on Vincent that night, she barely remembered other guests. But now that he mentioned it, vaguely. "Why?" Her name was Margaret Costello. Vincent's voice was careful. She was the matriarch of the Costello family, the one who ordered the hit on Alessandro. Grace's blood went cold. "What?" "I invited her as a message, a show of respect before the war. She came, watched the wedding, and left." Vincent moved closer to Grace. "She died yesterday. Natural causes. Heart attack." "I don't understand. Why are you telling me this?" "Because her will was read this morning." Vincent pulled out a document. "She left something to you." Grace stared at him. "To me? That's impossible. I never met her." "Apparently you did. Briefly. And it made an impression." Vincent handed her the document. Grace read it, her heart pounding. Margaret Costello had left her a letter and a substantial sum of money, $200,000, with specific instructions. Mako cleared his throat. "Should we give them privacy?" "No," Vincent said. "Grace should read it aloud. This concerns all of us." Grace's hands shook as she opened the sealed letter. The handwriting was elegant and old-fashioned. She began to read. "Dear Dr. Grace Chen, you don't know me, but I know you. I sat in the back of my grandson's wedding 6 months ago and watched you enter on Vincent Moretti's arm. I saw the way he looked at you, the way you looked at his son. And I understood something in that moment that has haunted me every day since. I am a wicked woman. I have done terrible things in my life. I ordered the death of children. I destroyed families. I convinced myself it was necessary, the cost of protecting my own family in a brutal world. But watching you that night, a doctor who had lost everything, who had been homeless and broken, who chose to save a child despite the risk to herself, I saw what I could have been, should have been. You chose mercy. I chose violence. After the wedding, I returned home and gave the order to kill Vincent's son. It was strategic. It was cruel. And it haunted me every moment afterward. When my men failed, when Vincent retaliated and destroyed my family's power, I accepted it as justice. I deserved it. This money is not charity. It is restitution. Use it for your clinic. Use it to save the people I spent my life harming. And know this, Vincent Moretti is a better man than I ever was. Love him. Save him from becoming what I became. You are the light in his darkness. Don't let that light go out. Margaret Costello." Silence filled the room. Grace's eyes were wet. "She watched you," Vincent said quietly. "At the wedding. Marco told me later that he saw her staring at you during the ceremony. I didn't think anything of it." Grace looked down at the letter. A woman who'd ordered Alessandro's death, who'd tried to destroy everything Grace loved, had seen something in her that changed everything. "This is insane," Grace whispered. "It's guilt," Sophia said softly. "And recognition. She saw in you what she'd lost in herself." Grace thought about Margaret Costello sitting in the back of that cathedral, watching love and family and celebration, seeing Grace with Vincent and Alessandro, understanding, in that moment, the cost of the life she'd chosen, and then going home and giving the order anyway, because sometimes understanding came too late. "What do you want to do with the money?" Vincent asked. Grace looked at him, at Marco and Sophia, at Alessandro peeking around the doorframe. "I want to expand the clinic," she said. "Open a second location. Maybe a third. Use this blood money to save lives instead of taking them." Vincent's smile was slow and proud. "That's my Grace." Marco stepped forward. "There's one more thing." Margaret's letter came with a request. She wanted to be buried in the family cemetery, but she specifically asked that you be invited to the funeral. She said she wanted someone who represented what she could have been to witness her end. Grace's throat tightened. "When?" "Tomorrow. Noon." Grace looked at Vincent. "Will you come with me?" "Always." The funeral was small. Margaret Costello's family had been decimated by the war. Only a handful of people attended. Grace stood beside Vincent, watching the casket being lowered into the ground. The priest spoke words about redemption and forgiveness. Grace thought about the woman in that casket, powerful, ruthless, broken by her own choices. She thought about the letter, the money, the impossible gift from an enemy. As they walked back to the car, Vincent took Grace's hand. "She was right, you know," he said quietly. "About what?" "You are the light in my darkness." Vincent stopped, turning to face her fully. "Every day with you, I choose to be better. Not because I'm afraid of becoming what she became, but because you make me want to deserve you." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Vincent, marry me." The world stopped. "What?" Vincent pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, perfect. "Marry me, Grace. Let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, loving you, trying to be the man you see when you look at me." Grace stared at the ring, at Vincent's face, at the future he was offering. A future built on blood and redemption, darkness and light, violence and healing. A future that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Yes," she whispered. Vincent's smile was blinding. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. Behind them, Marco whistled. Sophia laughed through tears. Alessandro jumped up and down shouting, "I'm getting a mama!" Grace laughed and cried and held on to Vincent like he was her anchor. 6 months ago, she'd been homeless and broken. 3 months ago, she'd almost walked away from this life. Now she was choosing it. All of it. The danger. The love. The impossible balance of being Dr. Grace Chen and Vincent Moretti's wife. "No regrets," Vincent murmured against her lips. Grace looked at her ring. At Alessandro running toward them. At the life spreading out before her, complicated and beautiful and hers. "Not one," she said. And for the first time in 2 years, Grace Chen believed it completely. 2 years later, Grace stood on the terrace of the Moretti mansion, watching the sunset paint the city gold. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, 7 months pregnant, carrying Vincent's daughter. Behind her, she heard laughter. Alessandro, now 9 and thriving, raced across the lawn with 3 children from the free clinic where Grace still worked 3 days a week. The clinic had expanded to 5 locations now. Margaret Costello's blood money had saved hundreds of lives. "Mama!" Alessandro called. "Come see what we found." "Mama!" The word still made her heart swell. Grace walked carefully down the terrace steps. Vincent appeared from nowhere. He always did when she moved too quickly, his hand supporting her back. "Careful, tesoro," he murmured. "I'm pregnant, not broken. You're carrying my daughter. That makes you precious cargo." Grace rolled her eyes but leaned into his touch. 2 years of marriage hadn't dimmed the intensity between them. If anything, it had grown stronger. She'd learned to live with Vincent's world. The security. The dangerous men. The things she didn't ask about. In return, Vincent had learned to let her keep her own identity. Her clinic. Her purpose beyond being his wife. They'd found balance. Imperfect, sometimes precarious, but theirs. Alessandro showed her the butterfly he'd caught, gently, carefully, planning to release it. Grace's lessons about compassion had taken root. "It's beautiful," she said. "Now let it go." Alessandro opened his hands. The butterfly flew away, wings catching the golden light. Vincent's arms wrapped around Grace from behind, his hand covering hers on their daughter. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Grace thought about the woman she'd been. Homeless. Broken. Hopeless. She thought about the woman she was now. Doctor. Wife. Mother. Healer of wounds both physical and spiritual. She thought about Margaret Costello's letter. About choosing light instead of darkness. About being the redemption in Vincent's violent world. "Yes," Grace said. "I'm happy." Vincent kissed her temple. Alessandro ran back to his friends. The city spread out below them, beautiful and brutal and full of possibility. Grace Chen had been given a second chance at life. And she'd chosen to spend it loving a dangerous man, healing a broken world, and proving every day that light could exist in darkness. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. And so ends the story of Grace and Vincent. A homeless woman who became the heart of a Mafia family. A powerful man who learned that strength isn't just violence, It's also love. If this story moved you, leave a like and share it with someone who believes in second chances. More stories of transformation and unexpected love are coming. See you in the next one.